everyone. We will wait for a couple of minutes and then we can start with the AMA.
Shankar, is there a Twitter link that I can share?
Yes, let me share in the whiteboard AMA. Can you see it? Rich, can you see it? Hello, am I audible? Can anyone please confirm in the whiteboard?
Yeah,
AMA?
you are.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, I'm just hang on a second. I'm just cool. Ramsey's got a migraine, so he's not able to do today. But consider this is like a little practice because we haven't really pushed anything or promoted anything.
Yep.
Right, 2 seconds. I'm just gonna get my AirPods and then I'll be back.
Sure. Meanwhile, a friendly reminder, the whole AMA session is going to be recorded. And as Rich mentioned, Kabocha's technical steward, Ramsey, won't be able to join us today due to unforeseen migrants. So we will be hosting another AMA, and that will be Kabocha's technical AMA, probably in a week or two. Rich, let me know when we can start.
All right, I think we're good.
Okay. Bonjour and welcome everyone to the long-awaited Kabocha's AMA session. We have Kabocha's founding steward, Rich, with us today as the AMA guest. So, on the behalf of whole community, welcome Rich. However, welcoming Rich is kind of weird as he is already one of the oldest contributor to the whole Edgeware ecosystem. So, Rich, would you like to give your brief introduction, your experience with the Edgeware ecosystem to our attendees?
Hello.
Yes, we can hear
Sorry.
you.
Right, that's better. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Good. Okay. Hey, hello. Thank you for that introduction, Shankar. I couldn't actually hear the introduction, so I don't know what you said, but I'm presuming you just said
No.
something about me.
I just said everyone that I started with welcoming you as a AMA guest, but I told that welcoming is kind of weird because you are already one of the oldest ecosystem contributor to the Edgeware ecosystem. So then I asked you to give a brief introduction or your journey with Edgeware and Kabocha.
Do you want? My journey to Edgeware. That's an interesting one. So I've worked in media for a long time. I've worked for the BBC and Channel 4 in this country in the UK. Um, I've launched social games. So I launched a social game back in 2012 on Facebook called I Am Player. There's a link in one of the articles that was written about us. Which was the first time I'd been involved in a project that had a kind of token to it, but it was within Facebook's ecosystem. So we built a game that merged gaming and film called Iron Player, and it let you live the life of a footballer. And we had 15 million players, and we were selling Nike virtual goods and Red Bull cans and all sorts of stuff. So that was the first experience I had of creating a game that had a not a cryptocurrency, but a digital currency within it, and using that as a way of incentivizing people to do certain things and certain behaviors in the game. Then off the back of that, launched a channel which still exists on YouTube called Copper 90, which is big. It's a bit like Vice, if you've heard of Vice, but for football. We're funded by Google and launched that around the world. It's now got about 250 million subscribers. Partners like Uber and Nike and Adidas and people like that. And then, but I was more interested really in the funding side of the stuff and how we could build networks that were sustainable in the way they would fund creative contributions and without having to resort to advertising media, which always pulls in a different direction to a community which is born with a sort of set of values. And that's essentially the sort of central problem of the internet, is that there is no sort of native funding system for networks for a community to sustain without having to rely on advertising. Anyway, so that led me into the rabbit hole of cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, then Ethereum, and all the way through to Decred, where I spent a lot of time. Decred's a fascinating project. Weirdly, I think actually more aligned with Edgeware and Kabocha than a lot of the Polkadot stuff, certainly with Ethereum. And Decred were trying to fund open source technology. They were using governance. They were using on-chain upgrades. They were doing this in 2015, so quite a long way ahead of most people. So I spent a long time contributing there, but couldn't really see how they could move past where they were at. And that was when I discovered Substrate and Polkadot. I'd been chatting to Gavin Wood in the early days of when he was launching Parity, and followed Parity, followed Polkadot, and saw the lock drop. I think I followed probably Tom at the time, Tom Ivy, and it was a really interesting experiment, and the distribution was fascinating. And I followed it along for a while, was contributing to Decred, and then when I kind of came back to Edgeware, there was this impasse. There was basically a massive disagreement between the two sides, Commonwealth Labs and Rems, who was on the other side, about how to fund things, not what to fund, but how to fund things. So that was kind of when I arrived and just saw that I could add value by mediating between the different groups, helping people maybe understand each other a little bit better, and kind of just posting stuff on Commonwealth, putting a proposal forward, working with Tom in the early days of the Edgeware agency, and that was really the route.
Thank you for the great introduction. I will start with a question from my side to start the AMA. So I will start with an unorthodox question. What hurdles you were expecting, but they didn't turn out to be that big of hurdles while launching Kabocha, due to the community-oriented structure of
What did I think? So, what did I think was going to be a hurdle, but turned out not to be a hurdle? Is that the question?
Yep. Or
Wow.
take a small hurdle.
that's a tongue twister. So what did I think was going to be a hurdle, but that didn't turn out to be a hurdle? In the end, I would say trying to do it. I had an idea in my mind for various reasons. A lot of them to do with legal and compliance and the uncertainty around the regulatory situation in the UK and certainly in the US. That we had to launch this in a way where there was no single group, no single issuer, certainly not decent partners, like ideally not Ramsey, like not anyone was solely liable for the project in the way that Commonwealth Labs was the issuing team for Edgeware. So whatever happens, like legally speaking, Edgeware is still the responsibility from a legal perspective of Commonwealth Labs as the launch team. So that was the concern, was how to create Kabocha or a network from a series of funded proposals and do it in a very organic, decentralized way where people, well, where we could choreograph the components. And we didn't really know at the start of Kabocha, by the way, what the key components were. So we just sort of started and we figured out as we went. So things like the Power ID, Power ID we didn't know the Power thread. So what I thought was going to be really hard at the start was how to assemble a team through a series of proposals to build a specific thing. So the project is Kabocha, but the proposals are the components, which are all contributed by different people. I thought that was going to be really hard, and it's turned out to be not maybe as hard as I thought, because there's quite a good working relationship with different people. There's certainly there's a good amount of trust with people in the Edgeware community now. I'd worked with people like Jan and Johan before. And yeah, I think I would say as well that the job Tom's done, the job that you're doing, Shankar, of communicating things and the organization, the overall organization of Edgeware has come on so far in a year or 2 years. So that's my answer.
Amazing. Thank you for such an elaborated answer. So now we are opening the stage for anyone to ask the question. So I will be inviting each of the participants to the stage. And those who can't actually join the stage, or those who want to those who prefer asking questions in a text format, they can ask their question in Whiteboard AMA channel, while other members can join the stage and ask the questions directly. And those who will be asking through the Whiteboard AMA channel, I will be asking the question to Reach on your behalf. So let's go.
All right, let me start. I have a couple of questions, but I come up really just right now. Reach, on the website, you write that the Kabocha is like funding and incubating teams to build a new public infrastructure. Can you tell what's your vision? What kind of infrastructure you want to build?
So it's a range of things, but initially, we're getting better at explaining the sort of the vision behind network publics. But ultimately, if we think about the countries we live in, so I can't remember you're in the UK at the moment, but if we think of the UK, the public of the UK is a stack of technologies really that are kind of consolidated into a full stack, which is the United Kingdom. And so underneath it all is an accounting system. So if we think about Edgeware, before you add a currency to it, Edgeware is a blockchain that has nodes and has a kind of shared transaction database, which is across lots of different nodes in a network. So that's a kind of accounting system. So I'd call that a public accounting system. And by the way, all of this stuff relies on having a fair and open and broad distribution. Otherwise, it would be a network private, if it was controlled by a small group of people. So a network public has this broad and fair distribution of the accounting system at the base layer. It has a currency, so there's a public currency, so this is infrastructure as well. On top of that, there is an organizational layer, which we're all used to using, or relatively used to using now, which is built around the certain palettes, the governance palettes, Commonwealth, the on-chain mechanics that effectively give you the ability to create instructions and to fund people to upgrade the network. So that's a kind of organizational layer. That's the public infrastructure on the organizational layer. And then the kind of the two bits we're adding to this accounting, currency and organizational layer are primarily, in the first instance, media and law. And so Ramsey's far more specialist on the law side, but I'll come back to that. But on the media side, ultimately, public media is, again, kind of part of the infrastructure of creating this network public. And so that will be a key part of Kabocha, and is kind of emerging out of Edgeware as well, where there is media that is funded and mediated by the community, where we communicate proposals. So right now we have a very, I would say, one-dimensional way of putting forward proposals, which is people write, this is what I want to do, this is the timeline, this is the cost. Whereas we can be better, or we can evolve the way we communicate proposals. So there can be more evolved films, there can be more evolved media. And equally, when a proposal is funded, we can make documentary films that follow that project. Now, obviously, it depends on what the project is, but ultimately, this is kind of what I mean by public media. We'll be creating that. Beyond that, there is some more kind of there are 2 or 3 proposals which we're still kind of figuring out how we're gonna. This is a big question in general about Edgeware and Kabocha's relationship. Like, there's a project which is an energy project. So that's for a new renewable energy project, which I've been involved with for about 5 or 6 years, which uses magnetic energy. There's a guy called Froda who's been on a few calls, who's been involved with that project for 20 years. So that would be an energy project. And the idea is, can we create a new kind of renewable energy that is open and able to be accessed through patents that are global in their nature. And there's also a transport project, and there's a few other different things, but you can run through public health, public media, public transport. So these are all kind of the building blocks of what a new public would be. And so I'd say public infrastructure is all of these different elements. Does that make sense?
I guess so. I'm interesting because it's reaching like beyond just digital, right? It's some ties over to real world as well, which is cool.
Yeah, we want to. That's the focal point is if we think about what a blockchain is really good for, and Edgeware is a perfect example of this. People forget how incredible it is that we have money that exists in this community, that we can decide how it's spent, where it goes, and it has some value to it. And you can also translate that into other currencies. And so really, when people ask what's Edgeware's product and what's Kabocha's product, what's its first product is money. And so money is the kind of like the central part of public infrastructure. And it's also built on this public accounting system, or relies on this public accounting system, relies on the public organizational structures. And so that is the public infrastructure at the core of it. And so if you start with that idea, then we're creating money, then ultimately we don't need to play financial, like just the idea of creating money and funding people with interesting projects, you can have real world impact, because ultimately it then just becomes about acceptance. Like these things are happening in really small ways, but fundamental ways, like the pizza drop, right? It's people are paying in some small way. Edgeware is paying for pizzas. Now, it's not too great a stretch to have people, like projects that come to us where they might accept Edgeware as a payment mechanism for their their products. So that is ultimately the game that everyone's trying to play, which is how do you get your currency accepted and how do you build a real economic system that is utilized and ultimately can have impact in the real world, because that's where the real revolution, I think, will be.
Cool. Thanks. I have a second question, which is maybe more. Can you say a few words about seeds works more in like a plain language and like how people can obtain them and what they can use it for?
Sorry, you cut out a bit. Say that first bit again.
If you say a few words about how the seeds Kabocha work, like people can get them and how they can use it also later.
That's a good question. Well, like all these things, we're coming up with ideas, then we're figuring out how they work as we go. So this is another part of building in public is we have a North Star, we have a direction, and we have things we're trying to achieve. And then we're figuring out the components as we go. So seeds is a good example of one of the core components. So everyone who contributes to, I think what we're going to be doing, and this has changed like 3 or 4 times because we've been trying to figure it out. So seeds are potentially infinite. So everyone who arrives in Kabocha can have a seed. Every account can have a seed. Every Edgeware holder who is involved can have a seed. This will be part of an onboarding process. The seed itself is just a static element. Just like think about this is why we pick seeds. Think about a seed. It's like unless you water it, unless you plant it in soil, unless you nurture it in some way, it won't do anything. It'll just sit there dead. But it'll also, like, you can come back to it at a later date and do all those things. So the thing that we'll probably give to the contributors of KSM, it's a specific kind of contribution that will have an effect on seeds. So Kasama contributors will get seeds in the same way Edgeware contributors will get seeds, but ultimately it will be a type of contribution that will have some sort of impact on the way a seed grows. And so going forward, what the whole point of seeds is to create a visual representation of your contributions to the Kabocha project. And so the contributions could be a whole range of things. And this is what we're going to be using Remark 2 for, the different ways that you can equip NFTs in Remark means that we can have a sort of static item, which is a seed, and then we can start adding components to it, and we can kind of attach NFTs to other NFTs. And also the logic can vary depending on the other items that are equipped. And we can also change the data. We can have oracles. We can do all sorts of things. So really, the seeds will start to become like we're going very, very much counter to the kind of the world of NFTs that has grown up on Ethereum, which is where you have a 10,000 limited edition. You can only get 10,000 apes. After that, you just have to buy one, and effectively they're set at the point you buy them. And if anyone's seen that insane Jimmy Kimmel clip, or Jimmy Fallon, I think it is, Jimmy Fallon clip with Paris Hilton talking about their Bored Apes. Like there's nothing unique really about a Bored Ape anymore. It's just were you rich enough to buy one, or were you there at the start? Whereas the thinking with seeds is everyone can have a seed, but what it becomes is entirely down to the algorithm that is you. Like, how do you contribute? What do you add? And so what we think will happen over time is this uniqueness, this individuality will be far more desirable than the kind of, oh great, I'm just showing this PFP off in my Twitter handle because really it's a display of wealth. It's like a status thing. Whereas the way that seeds will evolve visually, they'll also give you access. It'll probably relate to how governance works going forward, so your voting power. All the things that the challenges that we've seen within Edgeware, there will be different logic for different types of contribution within the seeds.
Thanks. Sounds good. That's all questions from my side.
Thank you, Ed. We got our first question in Whiteboard AMA in text format. So why Kabocha? How it accrues value?
How does Kabocha accrue value? So I think maybe it's worth stepping back and asking the question: how do blockchains become, or how do cryptocurrencies become valuable from both a kind of a design perspective, like what are the foundations of Bitcoin or Decred or any of these cryptocurrencies? What are they trying to do? And also, what's the narrative that ends up blowing up? So if you look at something like Bitcoin, the story of Bitcoin is that it's become a store of value. It's 21 million. It's a sort of limited scarcity mindset where there's only 21 million of these things. It's digital gold. There's a meme there. And that has become sort of the dominant narrative, which works for people who are very early into the project. So with Ethereum, you've got a kind of, well, there's going to be thousands, or there are thousands of apps, and that's going to create demand for the underlying cryptocurrency. And that demand is going to accrue through transaction fees. Now with the transaction fee burning that they have, there's a sort of deflationary path to that cryptocurrency. So both of them they're economic games that are scarcity games. Really, it's like there's a certain amount of stuff, and we're going to reduce the supply of this. Now that's kind of that's great, and that's the two designs. I think the third version, or a third very clear demand narrative or value capture narrative, is Polkadot and the relay chains, where they have a specific use case, very, very simple, which is there is a token which is the security, which provides security, a network which provides security for a whole range of different chains. And you need to acquire the native token in which to have access to that security. So it's very, very simple. There's nothing like it's focused in what it says. And so that is for Polkadot, for the relay chains, a very sort of simple, singular focus. And it's easy for people, investors, for people backing the project to understand, oh, I can see where demand is going to come from. It's not 50 things, it's one thing. Now, with Kabocha, the question was, how do we take a bit of both? So how do we take some of the demand narrative or inspiration from the simplicity of the relay chains, of the original thesis of Polkadot for multi-chain minimalism? Because what we were seeing in Polkadot and with the parachains was actually like similar issues or similar thinking to Ethereum, where you just got this chains that are going to build lots of apps and scale, and maybe that will create demand. And how could we kind of bring some of the store of value story that comes from Decred and from Bitcoin? And so that's where we came up with this idea, store of values, which is created through the exchange of value between a treasury, or sorry, the community who fund projects. So just like we fund projects in Edgeware right now, we will send money to fund like different people and their ideas. But there's nothing really coming back on the other side that is a clear sort of transfer of value from an asset perspective. So how we're sort of addressing this with Kabocha is that fungible currency, the native money of the network, KAB, gets sent in one direction to a team, and in the opposite direction, they assign Genesis rights, manifested or like executed or created as NFTs, which represent their idea, their concept, and will equate to rights, utility, and permissions in that project as it develops. So what we're creating is an asset-backed currency. So KAB is asset-backed. The assets it is backed by are the creative contributions of the people who are pushing or putting forward proposals to the network. And so anyone who is going to invest in and hold Kabocha will benefit from the aggregated utility, permissions, and ultimately cultural value attributed through those proposals. And so that's what we call cultural collateral. So it's a way, when people talk about like asset-backed tokens, this is an asset-backed token, except the assets are not real-world assets. They are purely on-chain assets that are created using Remark and are native to the chain.
Well explained. So that was a question by Morningstar. He actually gave a remark that everyone has a lot of emphasis on value creation, but quite hard to understand for an outsider. So he also asked another question: how you will target people outside crypto, or maybe I will rephrase that: will you target people outside crypto world?
Yes, and a lot of this will. Right now, these are concepts. We're kind of like creating the frameworks that will be turned into mechanisms that will become palettes or versions of palettes or extensions to palettes that we currently already use in Edgeware. So treasury or referendum democracy or other bits and pieces. So, but when these will start to feel real will be when we have proposals which utilize a lot of these new designs. So, for example, there's a proposal that is one of the proposals that will be coming up soon is, well, there's two actually. I'll give examples of. There's one which is Autofabrica. Autofabrica are a well-known design firm. They're very famous on Instagram, so they have 137,000 followers on Instagram. They are automotive designers. So they're kind of like the two brothers, and their kind of their journey has been designing and building motorbikes and kind of cars. And so the idea with them is how do we turn their 137,000 followers, who are all around the world and are both interested in the designs and the work that Autofabrica do, but within that 137,000 people, how many of those people in that community are also designers, are also talented in ways that we can unleash that potential talent for Autofabrica? So the idea is that we will be funding them through this mechanic to create a series of vehicles. This is in the kind of public transport type domain. So a series of vehicles that are experimental in nature, are about kind of bridging old manufacturing techniques with new manufacturing techniques. So they use everything from metal work all the way through to 3D design, 3D rendering, some of the virtual reality stuff they design in. But then also, how do we create a way for the people that they're a part of their community who may be new to crypto or just know a bit about Bitcoin or just know a bit about Ethereum? How can we create a way of almost like bounties? How do we create bounties and ways for them to contribute to these projects where they're able to get paid for their contributions? And so these projects become both digital, digital designs that are completely unique. And if you Google Autofabrica, if you go on, you can see like all the different online magazines that have talked about them, some of the biggest sort of design magazines in the world. And so that will be the way that our strategy for getting to new users, to getting to people who wouldn't ordinarily think about Edgeware or Kabocha, it'll be through the partners that we bring to the project. It will be the project teams who get funded by Kabocha that give us our reach into the mainstream, shall we say.
Thanks for the detailed answer. Moving on to the next question. But before that, a reminder that if you want to ask question, you can ask directly by joining the stage. I have invited everyone to the stage. And if you can't join by voice, feel free to ask question in the Whiteboard AMA channel. So next question is from Ash. Ash asked, what's the economics of Kabocha? What is the economics of Kabocha?
It's very, very simple. Kabocha's economics are exactly the same on day one as Edgeware. So we're doing a one-to-one distribution. So effectively, if you look at whenever we launch the network, we will be taking a snapshot of the Edgeware chain, the total supply, whatever it is at the moment. I think it's about, what is it? Well, Shankar, you'll know, 6.3 billion, something like that. So we'll be taking a snapshot of the economic structure of Edgeware's economy at that point, the total distribution, the total issuance, will then be redenominating. So we'll be moving the decimal place 2 places to the right, and that means that 1 edge will equal 1 kabocha. So Edgeware's economics and Kabocha's economics are absolutely the same, save the change in the decimal point on day one. The only changes we're making is the Kabocha that will be created from the Edgeware treasury will be moved to the Kabocha treasury, and we're also using that for crowd loan rewards. So that's how we get to the 4.9% and 4.9%, because Edgeware's treasury right now is around 10%, almost exactly 10% of the total issuance. The economics going forward are again really, really simple. We don't have inflation in the traditional way. Well, one, we don't have validators. We have collators because we'll be a parachain. So there isn't the same need to have inflation for validation in the same way you would with a solo chain. But the issuance going forward, we're not going to have a treasury. So we're not going to have some sort of inflation happening. We will only be creating new Kabocha tokens when a proposal is pushed forward and approved by the community. So that effectively means that the distribution, the inflation could be anything from naught, i.e. if we have no proposals approved in the entire first year, the inflation could be 0, and effectively Kabocha is a fixed supply coin. Or we could have approved a whole bunch of proposals and the community have agreed to fund a bunch of things, and that may equate to a inflation of 20% in that first year. And so, yeah, so this is a completely new experiment, and the reason for doing this is treasuries create interesting psychological traps in some ways, especially with very volatile currencies, because when you create, say, with the Edgeware treasury hasn't changed vastly in 2 years, the amount that's in the treasury. It's been around 650 million, well, between 500 and 700 million tokens. And so, but the value of that treasury has fluctuated between about, I think it was like 30 million at one point. It was on 30 million at one point, $30 million, and now it's at about $3.5 million. And so there's as you can kind of, people who have been contributing to the project, psychologically speaking, as the value goes up, people think, well, we've got we've got $30 million to spend. We can be much more kind of ambitious with our spending. We can maybe be more profligate. People are maybe attracted to that treasury. But the other way, if the value drops, then people will become quite conservative and worry about conserving the treasury. So the experiment we're running is to only create new tokens when people propose and approve new projects. And it's kind of like in a real economy. I think this is another way of us making it more mainstream, more easy for people to understand. This is kind of how people, I think, intuitively think an economy should work, is that you create new money when there's a new job. So that's kind of the sort of narrative idea really there.
Gotcha.
I'm sorry, Shankar, go ahead.
No, please.
So if it's a public goods blockchain and you're funding, like you're funding a variety of different projects and initiatives on your chain, great. Off chain and on chain, that's great. But if every single time you're funding a new initiative, you're creating more tokens, doesn't that automatically reduce the primary value, economic value of the existing tokens, such that the initiatives that they're taking let's say that I come on to Kabocha and I say, Rich, I have this interesting idea to build like a podcast or something like that, or just for hypothetical example. I ask for X amount of uh, Kabocha tokens to do that. Now, by the time I actually execute that and doing the operations of actually getting the podcast up and then continuing to run it, if it is considered a public good and it meets all the Kabocha rent requirements, I'd assume, and another project comes along, that creation of the token automatically deflates my value of my token such that to get the actual transactional like the real runway of that token, is it not? Is that something that you've modeled or considered? Is there any kind of like quantitative analysis or thought behind that?
I get what you're saying. So there's two responses. There's one, in principle, yes. If we keep on inflating, if we keep on inflating a supply with no demand to kind of like to come in to support that supply, then you're right. Like everyone will ultimately the inflation will remove the value that's been printed for the projects, right? That's your point.
Yeah, in a very simple scenario, if you're assuming 20% of inflation in a year, right? That 20% of inflation is 20% more. That means you're basically producing 20% more tokens to your entire supply. Now, if I'm the first person using a grant and I'm using that supply of the grant to do some real world kind of like off-chain creation of value here that is migrating some action back on chain, like by the time I execute that action, that 20% could kind of really put a huge dampener on this thing, right? So that's the thing that I was kind of addressing.
So yeah. So there are ways we can model that. I would say with the response is we have three things. I think there's the supply, which is going to be increasing using this mint on demand type approach. There is the assignment of rights, which is effectively a narrative device as well as a kind of utility device to create the demand or the narrative behind the currency being worth something. So there is reason why we could encourage new investors to come in. Additionally to that, because again, just to reinforce that point, if we don't create demand for the underlying token for investors, there's no like who are going to speculate on the future value of this currency, then it will reduce in value. The other thing we're adding into Kabocha, which maybe was going to come later as a question, but we're introducing something called Kabocha Notes or Notes, which is an extension or like a simplification of some of the stuff Shankar's talked about with convertible notes, where we will have a design where when the tokens are created, there is a buyer who is already there who will be willing to take the tokens from the project team, who want to liquidate to USD, GBP, whatever they want to, or BTC. And so that can be a listed company, and they effectively act as both a market maker and a liquidity provider, and they will in turn earn, like we haven't figured out the exact device, but they will earn tokens for being almost like a fully, in the way validators are rewarded for being on the whole time, they will be on and there to accept and to be the buyer of the tokens from the projects. So in answer to your question, like the levers we're pulling here are, we need to have more demand for the token from investors, from people who are betting on the future of the token and the future of the network and the things we're going to fund, then we are minting the supply, or else we're just going to like basically inflate the supply and the price will just track downwards. But that's kind of the truth of every cryptocurrency that's ever existed, really. And there've been like weird and fascinating experiments with inflation where a lot of the things you'd think would happen with tokens that have inflated at hundreds or thousands of percent haven't like done what you think, because they're held up by speculation most of the time. So we're not trying to create a speculative bubble, but we are going to need people who are speculating on the future value of the accrued assets, the talent of the teams, and the projects that we fund. But you're right that there is a sort of variability and this is an experiment, right? Like, so we're both changing and we're tweaking a bunch of different levers that are the foundational parts of a cryptocurrency. So I can't answer for certainty in any of these things because we're figuring it out as we go. But I think your concerns I understand, but I think from a kind of demand perspective, I think we're going to create a demand for this cryptocurrency that will combat the supply issuance of each project.
Okay, thank you.
So for those who don't know, the initial supply of Kabocha will be 6.64 million. And we actually discuss about benchmarking the proposals in one of the recent community calls. So the question is more about finding the effective value generation based on the benchmarking of that individual proposal. So if whatever deliverables are, and if those deliverables are creating more value than what they are taking, like when you are inflating by certain margin or percentage, they obviously liquidating other holders. But if in other perspective, if they are creating more value than what they are liquidating, then their effective value generation is positive. And that's exactly what Kabocha could aim for.
Well said. The thing I would also say, just which I should have said at the start, and maybe this isn't like, unlike most AMAs, the Edgeware community is the Kabocha community. Like, we've started this thing from the very, very start to ensure that the people who benefit the most from Kabocha are the Edgeware community. We have a thesis for what we think would be an interesting experiment that tackles a bunch of challenges that Edgeware's faced, and equally looking at the rest of the cryptocurrency market and more broadly kind of the problems in the real world. Like, what we're trying to do is introduce new ideas and new designs that could maybe address these problems, but we do not have anything close to all the answers. So every single question that people are asking is appreciated, and we're going to be very honest as we go through this whole process that we don't know most of the time. Like, and lots of the time it's people prodding us with questions. Say the seeds thing, people were asking us the other day how the seeds work, and we only really figured out what we were trying to achieve with the seeds when we had 2 or 3 questions that made us think about it in slightly different ways. So I would say that Kabocha is a project born from Edgeware, and therefore the Edgeware community are all valuable contributors, or hopefully will be valuable contributors to Kabocha, and have been so far anyway. So that was just something I probably should have started the AMA with.
I'm loving the discussion. Moving on to the next question from Livian. Does Kabocha seed will evolve in layers with upgradation? Just like some projects, they have eggs which get upgraded.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I think probably. I think the logic of these seeds will be entirely defined mostly by the questions people ask. We haven't figured out what the logic is, but I think we know a lot of the logic will be defined by the mechanisms that we're introducing alongside the existing mechanisms that already exist within Edgeware. So if you engage in a proposal, if you comment, if you turn up, all the stuff that Shankar's been doing with the community moderating, people who take part in the community in some way. So we're gonna, if you imagine there's a menu, or there's a sort of, like every computer game, that they're generative. So the algorithm that decides what your seed develops into and how it grows and what assets it kind of has and what the ecosystem around it looks like and what permissions you have, what rights you have, will be defined by the variables that are the kind of almost like the genetics that go into your participation within the network.
Amazing. Moving on to the next question by Onlyjit. Looks promising. Gotta ask a question asking roadmap for next couple of months after Kabocha is launched.
Well, given the like someone like Tom would probably be better to give his experience of what like executing a roadmap is like from the start of Edgeware, but we're trying to keep things incredibly simple. So the roadmap for the first 3 months is literally, can we launch the blockchain? Can we bond to Kasama okay? Can we upgrade the chain? Can we add the pallets that we need? Can we add some of the design specific ideas? So the minting on demand or proof of proposal, I think we're calling it now, proof of project. We're gonna beyond that. Like I think the roadmap is really focused on the proposals we're going to fund. So what are going to be the first 3 to 5 projects that will kind of come to Kabocha's governance? What will we fund? What will be the cultural collateral they provide? What will be the story of how they kind of relate to the different parts of the project in terms of the contribution and the participation aspects? Beyond that, it'll be about launching a new. So there's the relay, there's the pop art testnet, which is a relay testnet, which is currently ongoing. Beyond that, there will be a new relay system that we'll launch. That will be towards the end of the year, and that's entirely up in the air how we do that, but that will have a whole new way, or hopefully a tweaked way to elect validators. So Jelly DAO's been working on that. So there's a different way to elect a more fairer kind of, maybe not fairer, but a different way to elect people that is a broader distribution of validators rather than the way we see Edgeware right now. But I'd say that the stages are relatively simple, which is firstly launch Kabocha, get the governance working, have our own interface for governance that's maybe a little bit simpler and a little bit more dedicated than we currently have the Commonwealth, and to bring some proposals to the project, and then start working on the relay chain, with the path being that the funded projects within Kabocha, but equally those that start in Edgeware, will go on to become parachains that we launch into the relay network, but that will probably be towards the end of the year, if not next year.
Amazing. Excited for the relay network and other things Kabocha could achieve in the future. So we have a question from Zirom. What will be the supply of Kabocha seed? Can people earn passive income by holding a seed like KB or EDG?
What was that? So what's the supply? Well, so the supply of seeds, that was the first bit. I missed the second bit, but the first bit, the supply of seeds, it will be as big as the size of the public that we create. So if you imagine a seed is kind of like a passport, how many passports can there be in a country? Well, it's the number of people who are born into and kind of are part of that country. So it's definitely not going to be 10,000. It's not a scarce thing in the way we see most NFT projects. So everyone who enters Kabocha can get a seed. But like I said before, the rarity, the uniqueness, the special traits will be entirely generated by the contributions that you make towards the network. The second part, what was the second part?
So he asked, can people earn passive income by holding a seed like KB or ADG? Or will there be any staking mechanism for seeds?
No idea. Maybe. We haven't thought that far ahead. With seeds specifically, we haven't thought that far ahead. With Kabocha, I mean, there are a bunch of things that will probably there will be ways that you can stake your KAB. I'm sure there are projects who've approached us within the Kasama ecosystem who want to, say for example, Bifrost want us to enable people who've staked their or locked up their KSM, who've locked up their KSM to effectively have a derivative that they can use elsewhere. So I don't know at the moment. We're trying to do the simple things first, and then some of that stuff may emerge, but I can't tell you at the moment.
Thank you. We are now out of questions, but Tom recently joined the stage. So I will ask Tom if you have any questions, thoughts, or suggestions, any comments.
We've got
Tom, you are not audible.
I also have one question. I see that the crowd loan is right now open, right? And it will end in 55 days, right? If I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
So basically, I'm just wondering, for how many days it's been open till now?
It's been open for 8 days. I think it was 66 days at the start. I think it's now 57. 9 days.
Mm-hmm. So, and how are we confident that we will make it? Because I see it's only about 5% of what is needed, basically.
Yeah, I mean we're confident, and we know there are a bunch of teams. So we rushed to the launch in some ways because for a few reasons. We suddenly realized that there might be a slot that was coming up that we could get for a relatively low amount, maybe like 2,000 KSM, 3,000 KSM. So we took advice from one of the Kasama council, and so we launched quickly, which actually meant that we were a week ahead of where we thought we were launching. So no one had unbonded their KSM, because most people who've got a sizable amount of KSM have got it all bonded. So it takes 7 days to unbond KSM. So we're waiting. There are a few teams who are going to be contributing, but not until we enter the crowd loan an auction period. So we're only entering auctions from 36 onwards, I think, which is next month. So what's the date today? 22nd. So yeah, so from next month the auctions line up. So we've basically requested a few teams don't contribute until then. There are just ongoing conversations we have with big holders, big funds. I think we're going about this like we've tried to in the with Edgeware, but with the beginning of Kabocha, we're trying to do this in an as organic way as possible. So you'll probably note that, I mean, Kabocha's got, I don't know, 800 followers, 700 followers on Twitter, compared to most of the parachain projects have got like 20,000, 30,000. And that's generally down to the incentives that people create at the start of crowd loans, which is really good for incentivizing contributions to a crowd loan, but very poor for an initial distribution. So a lot of the teams that are launching and using the crowd loan incentives to bootstrap a community, they're doing a great job of building a community very fast, but they're not going to be, it's going to make things much harder long term. So in answer to your question, like, we are confident we'll win a crowd loan. We know there are people who will contribute. The bit that we don't know, so the 25,000 as well, we don't need to reach the 25,000 cap. I think we probably only need 10,000 to win a slot. The bit that we don't control, that we don't know, is that there are a few teams that are coming around for the second time who have acquired a lot of KSM themselves in their first year, and so who are kind of sniping slots. So that's something we can't control. But I mean, like there are enough people out there who have enough KSM for us to win a slot. So I'm not concerned because there's other stuff we can control and we can't worry about that.
Okay, got it. And maybe another one, like maybe more like a theoretical question, like let's say that like we win parachain slot and everything, then we get listed on the exchanges, right? And as there was no like ICO or anything like that, do you have any idea like what would be the value of the token when it got listed?
No idea. No idea. No idea. Like you're asking me to that's that's a question that if I could answer that, then I wouldn't be doing this. I'd be God. So yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, because like how it would be like with, for example, with ICO or something like that, people would ask, what was the value of during the ICO, and based on that, they would like.
I see what you mean. Oh, I see what you mean. So based on like well, you can. There's a number of ways you can look at it because people have asked that question. So outside investors, we're talking to like different funds. There's a way of valuing the network based on the contributions of KSM. So say if you look at there's 5% of the network which is available to KSM holders. The price of KSM is $150 right now or something like that. So you can then kind of work backwards or work forwards from there and go 150 KSM to get 5% of the supply. And like using very simple like maths, that kind of equates to a network value of about $9 million. I can't remember if I worked it out in pounds or dollars, but say $9 to $12 million. Now Edgeware's network value is $31 million. So you could say that there's a 3 times the value that you could, but like it's very like it's like doing any business model. Like you can put the numbers in and it can sound good, but until we do it, we won't really know. Like I have no idea if Kabocha's network value when we list it is going to be like $10 million or $100 million or more. Like who knows? But in terms of the initial token price, I mean, how would you do it for Edgeware? Because what was Edgeware's initial token price? There wasn't really a token price. You could only work it back from the opportunity cost of locking your Ethereum for whatever it was, a year. So I don't know how you'd do that with Ethereum. Maybe someone else could with Edgeware. I don't know. I don't know if anyone's ever tried.
Yeah, thanks for answer. Yeah, it basically was more like a theoretical question, because I guess some sort of like reverse engineering with how many KSM being locked, you could do some sort of math, but yeah, it's more like theoretical thing, theoretical question.
Yeah. I don't know. It's a good question to ask. And we can speculate on it. And like I said, we've talked to more traditional investors who wanted to value it in that way. So they were going, well, if we went to acquire KSM to lock in this crowd loan, what is the cost of this investment to them? So they were working it backwards from what's the cost of the KSM, what does that KSM get me in terms of the supply, and then you can kind of roughly work out like what a supply would be. Now that also, the other variable that makes it even more complicated is that would depend on how much KSM it would take to win a crowd loan. So if it was 3,000 KSM to win a crowd loan, to win an auction, that's very different. And you split the 5% across 3,000 KSM is very different to if we get 25,000 KSM and split that across the 5% across that 25,000. Does that make sense? You end up with a diminishing supply the more people contribute. So there's this weird game theory at play, which is like people have sort of messaged us saying that there's actually value in Edgeware contributors. If you wanted a larger stake in Kabocha, like if we win a slot around 9,000 KSM, then the edge price and the KSM price basically even out. if we win it with less than 9,000 KSM, then it's worth you selling your edge and getting KSM to get more cab. But anyway, there's someone had worked this out. So we were discussing about sharing it, but there's basically game theory at play in terms of how, like what the eventual valuation and how people will value this in this kind of funding.
Yeah, it makes sense. Got it. Thanks.
So we got another question from Frogman. What is the use case of Kabocha seed? He joined quite late, so he was not sure if it was already answered.
So the use case of Kabocha is it's the simplest possible use case. It's money. We're creating money, and Edgeware is money. It's a form of money. So Kabocha is just a version of money that has the three kind of principal traits of money, which is it has a store of value mechanism, which is the acquisition of assets to its reserve, which become backing for the currency. So that's a store of value. It is a medium of exchange in the fact that people will come to the project and will put forward proposals which they will be funded. So they're exchanging their talents, their experience, their resources for Kabocha's token. And it will be a unit of account in the long run, which means that there is a whole ecosystem of services that are priced in and available to be bought in KAB. That's the use case, basically being money.
Thank you. He actually asked about what's the use case for Kabocha seed. But maybe
sorry, seed.
you already got covered, no?
Oh, sorry. So Kabocha seed, yeah. Well, very quickly, if you were late. So Kabocha seed is a way for people within Kabocha to citizens or the public, the community, to have a shared way of governing the system, contributing to the system, and attributing their work or their contributions to a specific asset. So seeds are that specific asset, and so seeds will develop and evolve and emerge as these kind of unique NFTs, which look unique depending on what you've contributed, how you've contributed, when you've contributed, and that will be the kind of the identity. So Kabocha's identity. That's the sort of like that will be what you use for your identity. It will be a way you accrue your permissions and your rights. Like for people who've listened to Tom talk about Edge Pass, it's like the same sort of idea within that. It's just it becomes your rights, your reputation, your responsibilities, your roles, your passport. Like let's just, if I simplify it all, it's Kabocha's seed is your passport to the ecosystem. But it also becomes your kind of like your on-chain CV, your roles, responsibilities, and all that sort of stuff.
I have a follow-up question. So as you mentioned, Kabocha seeds won't be transferable. Would that open a possibility for people selling the whole account on some third-party marketplace? In case of someone comes in and determines some score or value, any kind of speculative amount representing the rarity of those NFTs. So
that's a good question. I don't have a good answer for that. I think it's I would say on first thought, the idea is that we're going to be incentivizing ongoing contributions. So if you wanted to sell it, the whole account, then I guess people could do that. But really, the thing we value most is ongoing contributions. So a bit like, again, that's why I'm thinking about seeds. Like if there's a plant that's grown, if you've got some sort of like beautiful garden or like thing that's evolved, if you just sell it to someone and they're just going to sit on it and not do anything with it, then ultimately that will kind of like, if it's like not watering a garden, it won't be valuable unless you continue to contribute. Although like we haven't really thought through this as far as that, but I would say there are always going to be cases where someone might figure out a way around that system. But in general, I think the non-transferable nature of it for the people we're talking about will be something that sort of doesn't cause too many issues. Who knows? Don't know.
Fair enough. Last call for any questions, any thoughts. If you don't have any questions, you can share your comments as well. Sohan, please take it over.
Hey guys, how's everyone doing? Hey Rich, what's going on, man?
Hey, how you doing?
All right. I have a thought for you. If your seeds for your cab aren't transferable and they will only be given to the edge contributors, then I'm assuming you don't want to have new contributors?
No.
Or will you eventually allow like new futures or something to trade? Because I guess the direct question is, how does a new person into cab gain a seed that represents their contribution?
Every new entrant to Kabocha. So you know how like when you create an edge address, you link it to a Commonwealth ID. There's no restriction on anyone being able to do that, right? The only thing we're really doing is like there will be an edge address that you'll start with. You'll link that to a seed, an NFT, and so a seed will be given to anyone, just like you create a Commonwealth account, who effectively creates a governance account or an address on Kabocha. So anyone who joins the community can create a seed. The fact is, though, that a seed just sits there, doesn't do anything. It doesn't grow. It just remains passive until you start contributing, and that's when the seed will evolve. So Edgeware contributors, like, and this is how we're going to have to figure out the logic of these seeds as we go. People who contribute KSM, if you imagine in the crowd loan, that is a specific type of contribution that will have some effect in the future on the seeds, because it's like a trait. In the same way, if you held Edge at the snapshot, that will be a different kind of trait, and that will have an effect on the seed. If you arrive at a later date and you are just someone completely new to the project, you won't be able to have the crowd loan trait, and you won't be able to have the snapshot trait. So there will be some rarity. There will be some ways that the seed evolves that won't be able to kind of you won't have those two traits.
Understood. Second question. Your council, will you have a council? I listened to your podcast with Sir Have You Heard, but I still had some questions about your council system and the thoughts that maybe you and Ramsey had after that meeting. Were you still having a council, or what was your voting structure?
So we are not going to have a council initially. Now, I think it's interesting to think about what is the council. So the council is just a collective of accounts which are elected in certain ways. We can elect different groups in different ways to groups that have specific domain expertise within Kabocha. I think the question is not that we won't have a council or the idea of a council. It's just how will we elect those people in a way that's different to the way Edgeware worked. Because right now the council, which people may or may not know, there's 13 members of the council who are elected by people staking or voting with their edge to elect a certain group. The fact is that 7 or 6 of the accounts that are involved in the council are inactive, like they're Commonwealth accounts really, and they don't participate, they don't really get involved. So it's not particularly kind of like functional. It does its job, but really what we want going forward is if we imagine seeds, for example, if people are contributing on a daily basis and are adding value on a daily basis, there can be a new way that we can elect people to different positions within specific councils. Equally, the role of decent partners and decentration. Me and Ramsey have talked about the fact that decent partners, its role in the system is to onboard new proposals, new people, and ultimately represent that kind of bridge between the community and the proposals, so project teams. So, for example, we could have decent partners electing people to decent partners from project teams who are funded and deliver projects. They could be one particular type of council that would sit representing project teams on the on Kabocha. Decentration, which is Ramsey's entity, is going to be technical. So Ramsey is really focusing on all the technical aspects and building a technical team around him. So the technical committee, which exists in Polkadot and Kasama, we could remake the technical committee, and that could be something that would be born out of decentration as a separate governance entity. So we're not going to have a council in the way Edgeware has a council, but the way Edgeware has a council is it's dysfunctional, and ultimately we believe that we can have elected groups and specific skills brought to a group who might have specific power over certain aspects, but they will come out of the contributions, the same as seeds. They'll come out of the contributions that you make to the network, rather than just being the amount of tokens you have.
Okay. Well, two questions. Well, I guess that leads into the second one of voting. What is your voting structure? Is it the same voting weight, or is it 1-to-1?
No, initially, this is something that we've been talking a bit about, but initially we're going to run with, it depends. At launch, we will probably have exactly the same structure as we currently have. So we'll be using simple majority proposals, and it will be token weighted. As the project evolves, we'll be able to add more nuance to it. That's my sort of sense of where we're at the moment.
Secondly, then, you said it's a elected council. Was that correct?
Yeah, as in it'll be, if we have a group of 10 people who are elected by the community, they will be elected in different ways, but that is TBC.
By the Edge community? That's what I'm trying to follow.
Well, no, but this is the sort of difference between everyone who holds Kabocha, everyone who holds Edge will be Kabocha holders. So in essence, the decision making is really if you want to come and contribute and make decisions in Kabocha, it will be the same group of people initially. So if you're active in Edge.
That's why I said Ed, but you said no, so I am trying to understand.
Sorry.
No, I'm more trying to understand why you said no and what your perspective is. It's not like I'm not doing gotcha games. I'm really just trying to understand. So it's that's more what it is. Because to go with that, if they are Edge holders and anyone who has contributed to KSM, your election period to the people who have different powers, is that happening what period is that happening? What powers are they having? And then I have the last question that you'll get the point of what all these questions are about.
Okay.
It's so long-winded. I don't mean
no, don't worry.
I haven't been able to talk to you, so don't blame me. Don't judge me.
It's okay. So I think the philosophy of Kabocha from the very, very start has been, let's go back to the basics. Let's go back to the simplest possible system we can design, and let's focus on the key issues that Edgeware has faced and other networks have faced. And so when it comes to the sort of initial voting, it'll be, I would be surprised if we develop anything specific, but it will be using simple majority proposals that will be just as we've been doing proposals right now, except there won't be a council there will be. I can't guarantee there will. Well, I don't think there will be. Like Ramsey might have different views, but ultimately, we want to make this as an extension of what we've already been doing in Edgeware. So proposals put forward, approved without needing a mediating entity like the council, put to simple majority via a network service provider. So decent partners will be kind of curating. So I'd say in a certain way, the network service provider is a version of a council in the fact that there's a sort of curation element. But
just for that part,
yeah.
and that's what I'm trying to understand. Is like I have no issues. Again, like that's the understanding of like that's where the role and function or the effective function of the council is what you're really trying to, I guess, like improve or like add more to, right? It's my question is about the other part, like the powers and controls that the council have.
Right. Okay.
Like that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there shouldn't be any. The history of Edgeware has been a gradual devolution of power to more and more of the community. We want to kind of make that even more explicit within Kabocha. So the initially Ramsey will have sudo, which is the rights to upgrade the chain, but ultimately beyond the launch of the Genesis state into the chain and sort of switching everything on and adding in democracy and the different palettes that enable voting, like we're handing over the network to the holders of Kabocha's token, and in an even more kind of, who knows if it'll work, but ultimately in an even more experimental way than Edgeware, because there is no council. The only, like I would say, the only way that we're kind of adding some checks and balances is by inserting a network services provider into the kind of onboarding of projects. So there's not just going to be random people initially putting proposals to be voted on. There may be something on the technical side. So there may be an equivalent of a network infrastructure provider. So Ramsey and the kind of on the technical side, there may be something from an upgrade perspective that he will add, but I don't know what that might be. Does that answer your question in general?
Well, sort of, but one side thought. I do think again your approach is wise. One side, just detail. XRT did a similar move before they launched their parachain. They released their pseudo keys, and if you understand a little bit about where their origin is and why they would make such a move so quickly, you could tell that they were really focused on decentralization. Let's say it like that. And so a lot of their core functions are just now have to be done. You can call it whatever you want, like a tech committee, a council. It's just that it's like, all right, there's a different team that collectively decides, okay, we're going to execute this command. And it's like that is what, changes the centralized control point. So that's what freed them up. So that's why I was like, I absolutely do believe it's positive and toward the direction you're going. The last question is about the distribution process. So if the one-to-one edge hold and it's going to the treasury, and if the treasury wallets aren't, you said like 50% of the treasury wallets aren't going to be created into another treasury for CAB, that's going to go into, I'm assuming, a set of wallets are between you and Ramsey. Does that mean your voting weight? Like, are you guys God tier?
On the the initial so we haven't decided on the initial treasury design. There is a portion of the supply which is agreed for the initial maintainers, which is in the initial proposal. There's then some of that 5% is set aside for the recoup for Kabocha, for Edgeware. So there needs to be a way of transferring that out. And then there's the collators as well. So I don't know. I was asking the other day. I don't know how much we've spent so far with the different Kabocha proposals, but we'll total that up. But in answer to your question about is your question specifically about who controls, like what is the way of controlling that treasury?
No, the weight of the voting.
The way to the voting. Well, it's
Because
going to be
because it gets
yeah.
split in the EDG. So
Yeah,
I mean, I'm just following the weight of the voting. Yeah.
yeah. So the way to voting is going to be this is kind of the experiment. The same biggest holders as in Edgeware. So if Commonwealth Labs wanted to get involved in Kabocha and wanted to screw it up, they could get involved in the voting and they could just veto everything. So because we're going
That's
to be
my
using,
question.
yeah,
No,
that's
no, that's my like. Will is because the Treasury? I'm assuming, and I don't know. I'm assuming the Treasury wallets are higher than like the Commonwealth wallets. So it's like if those wallets aren't going 1-to-1, because you said you're not doing a 1-to-1 cab trade. So it's like, okay, so then the weight of those tokens are getting distributed out somewhere else, and that's what I'm trying to follow. It's like, where is all that weight going?
uh, well, it's not. It's not. We're doing the 1-to-1, and then there's the 5% is going into the is being split between crowd loan and the treasury. So that is going into a treasury just like Edgeware's treasury, which will be controlled by the KAB token holders. So it's exactly the same. So it's a like for like. So the system is exactly the same. It's just we're removing the council as it currently stands and adding in a network service provider on the proposals. So if we want to access there is Ramsey can be maybe clearer on this than me, but the funds that are initially apportioned for maintainers will be going to myself and Ramsey, which was agreed already, and then the remaining of that treasury will be used for collators and for, say, the Edgeware recoup. How we go about the Edgeware recoup is another question. So whether that's done at Genesis or whether that's effectively whether we transfer that KAB to Edgeware, how that works, I don't know. But anything remaining in that 5%, so say there's 2% left, will just be sitting in a multi-sig wallet, which is controlled by through democracy and through proposals that are put through the same on-chain process pretty much as Edgeware.
Understood. Okay, that was my only concern about the structure.
So we're not, and part of this is it's interesting. Like me and Ramsey say, well, think about the people who are kind of the main contributors to Edgeware. I would say, like between Tom, me, Ramsey, like Shankar, like pick 10 or 12 people who have been long-term contributors to Edgeware. Between us, we maybe control 20 million EDG, 30 million, like not a huge amount. And if you look at kind of Commonwealth Labs or Brems or a few of the other big accounts, they control hundreds of millions of Edge. And yet we're kind of able to direct the chain and fund people, and those accounts haven't actually interfered too much. So kind of what we're proving at the moment, and I mean maybe this system will get gamed if we get bigger, and we're
Those are my thoughts. Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm
like
just-
I think as it'll get bigger, like there'll be more of a chance for people to game the system. But that's part of the reason why we're instituting seeds, and the key is for us to develop seeds into these governance into part of the governance system that can't be gamed as easily as just holding a massive amount of tokens.
And I'm completely with you on that too. As soon as you guys were talking about it, my thought is like the last word you said, the rep. It's like you can incorporate that beautifully and even maybe highlight or like start to I can't even think of the word right now. Delegate some of their curation to like certain holders. Eventually, when they get the reputation of just for your bandwidth sake, eventually, you know what I mean. The amount of people that you start onboarding may become overwhelming. So just
completely.
it's functional. Yeah, it's functional in lots of ways. And then one last part: if ever you wanted any of that modeled as far as like the cost analysis, just let me know. I'll reach out to you on some one-on-one because I could show
Sure
you
thing.
that data.
Definitely. I mean, like I said, we're figuring this out as we go, so we want people to be contributing.
I'm here for you. Okay. Nice to talk to you, man.
Nice one.
Hope you've been doing well.
Amazing discussion. So for those who don't know, Edgeware actually launched with the sudo palette. However, Commonwealth Labs set the sudo key to 0x00. So even though sudo palette is there, no one can use the sudo. So Edgeware was launched with democracy since the genesis. And in long term, we could replace, eliminate the console completely, because there is a liquid democracy palette, as well as Rames did actually some research about making simple majority as the default instead of super majority bias, and that actually works. So Azure will continue to experiment along with the Kabocha. Moving on to the next question. Jerome asked, how will Kabocha bring changes to the current metaverse ecosystem?
How will Kabocha bring changes to the metaverse ecosystem?
Yep.
How will it? It will do. Well, I guess it depends how you like. There's going to be it depends how you define metaverse, but I think of metaverse as I don't know. I don't even know how I think about metaverse. It's so many different people are given versions of it. I think we'll just be funding interesting projects from interesting people, doing things that are culturally relevant, culturally impactful. Our hope or our aim from the very start, like my background for a long time has been media and building global brands. So I think the point is that we want Kabocha and the idea of network publics to become a culturally important idea that connects with people, that resonates with people, and that provides something use to people in the world, and that addresses or looks to address specific problems with the privatization of the public sphere. And yeah, so our view on the metaverse is that it's we want people to have fun, but we also want to kind of make some impact in the way people live their daily lives, rather than just creating a sort of casino in the sky.
Indeed.
Love it.
So,
Should I just say another casino in the sky?
Rimsey actually mentioned earlier that Kabocha is creating subverse and kind of a metaverse. So he might be implying that instead of having a virtual character, you will have real identity, but characterless identity, and that could be powered by Kabocha seeds.
Yeah. Well. So everything you're seeing right now with Canarias, with Remark, they've just done their land sale or are doing their land sale. Everyone has a relatively simple, like you could call like the Bored Ape Yacht Club. They've just done a crazy amount of fundraising, and they've just bought up all the crypto. What's it called? Oh, my brain's gone blank. What they call like anyway, but they're creating a world that is accessed by holding a Bored Ape in your MetaMask, and that metaverse that is the experience of Bored Ape will range from experiences online through to like TV series, through to animations and comics, and like it's a Marvel type approach. So seeds are exactly the same. It's just we're going about things in a different way. So the world that we're creating, everyone's trying to build a world, right? So Kabocha and the network public's world that we're creating will be accessed by seeds, and all the different projects and proposals that we fund will be linked in some way to the seeds, and the seeds will give you access to those experiences, whatever they turn out to be. So that's the kind of metaverse. So there may well be sort of visual experiences, like art experiences, physical locations, physical experiences, music events, festivals, all that sort of stuff. But we need to walk before we can run.
Amazing. So to summarize, Kabocha is kind of actually building a backend, while anyone can come and use that backend to create a metaverse based upon that backend. So there could be multiple metaverses based upon the contributions happening in the backend of Kabocha.
I would say maybe I'm not. I would say every parachain on the relay chain will be its own world. I prefer world rather than metaverse. So you could have a world of Autofabrica, you can have a world of whatever else project there is. There's a music label we're working with at the moment who've got a number of well-known artists. The worlds. I think the future of relay chains, or the future of our relay chain, will be, imagine every single chain is a channel on the TV that you can switch between, except that channel is also something that you could engage with on your TV, your mobile, your laptop, but also can have real world experiences. So it's a version of like Red Bull or Nike or MTV, and each one of those networks, each one of those chains is a metaverse, and the overall relay is the sort of union of those metaverses.
Mm-hmm. And now
I'm trying not to say metaverse.
Now we are out of questions. So last call. If anyone wants to ask any questions, share any thoughts. Okay. Great. Would you like to say anything to conclude?
I hope Ramsey's headache goes away. So I wish him well. Apologies that he couldn't be here. But yeah, thank you very much for everyone joining. And like I said, I think halfway through, Edgeware is this. It might seem small and it might not like have a huge market cap like lots of other projects, but I genuinely think Edgeware is one of the top 5 most interesting cryptocurrency projects out there, because we're doing things in a truly decentralized way. Kabocha is unique in the fact that it's a network that has been funded by another network, where Edgeware will retain a stake in the network. It's not a fork. It's not like a contentious fork like Bitcoin Cash and Bitcoin. It's like a genuine experiment in building internet native communities that are sovereign with their own financial system, their own organizational system, and their own monetary system. So yeah, like it's the people who are here and the people who are around contributing now will, I think, be around and hopefully contributing to Kabocha and to the networks that Kabocha launches. And yeah, it's exciting. So we're going to all figure it out together.
Indeed. And as you mentioned, it is one of the top 5 interesting projects as per you. And I guess many of will agree with it. And that's the league of Edgeware. And I hope Kabocha will soon join the Edgeware's league. Thank you so much, Rich, for your valuable time, for dedicating it to the community and agreeing to join the AMA even as a solo guest from the Kabocha side. And most importantly,
Fine, thank you.
And most importantly, thank you all to all our participants, community members. Last but not the least, As a thank you note, all the AMA participants who asked the question will share a pool of 100k ESIP tokens. So don't forget to DM me your AGVM address. And this concludes our first ever Kabocha AMA. So we will be having a technical Kabocha AMA soon with Ramsey. Obviously, we could have reached at that time as well. And that's it for the day. See you everyone in the Monday's week planning call. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Shankar.
Thank you.
Thanks for stopping by, Rich.
Cheers.
See you.
All right. Bye.
See you.